You are the master of your destiny. You can influence, direct, and control your own environment. You can make your life what you want it to be. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the world still slumbers and dreams, a select few rise with purpose. They understand a truth that has escaped the masses for centuries. The first 90 minutes of your day contain within them the seeds of your destiny. This is not mere poetic language, it is the distilled wisdom of history's greatest achievers. Those who recognize that mornings are not simply the beginning of another day, but rather the foundation upon which empires of achievement are built. Consider this truth. While you sleep, your mind processes, plans, and prepares. The subconscious, that powerful force Napoleon Hill described as the workshop, where thought transforms into reality, continues its labor even as your conscious mind rests. And in those first moments of waking, a unique window exists, a sacred time when the barrier between your conscious and subconscious mind stands at its thinnest. This is the golden hour when thoughts planted take root with extraordinary power. The titans of industry and masters of human achievement have always known this. Thomas Edison, whose inventions illuminated the world, began each day at 5:30 a.m. with a specific ritual of contemplation and planning. Andrew Carnegie, whose steel built America's skylines, attributed much of his success to his morning discipline. Henry Ford revolutionized not just the automobile, but the very concept of modern industry through habits established in pre-dawn hours. These men did not stumble upon success. They deliberately crafted it in the forge of their morning routines. Yet most people squander this precious time. They reach for their phones, immediately flooding their minds with the opinions, anxieties, and agendas of others. They hit the snooze button, teaching their subconscious that commitments, even those made to themselves, are negotiable. They rush through their mornings in a fog of reaction rather than creation, responding to the world's demands instead of defining their own path. Is it any wonder, then, that these same people feel their lives are not their own, that they are passengers rather than pilots of their destiny? The truth remains unchanged since the beginning of human civilization. How you begin determines how you continue. The Roman philosopher Seneca understood this when he wrote that the whole day depends on how you manage its beginning. Modern neuroscience now confirms what ancient wisdom has always suggested: the brain's executive functions are strongest in the morning, and the habits you practice in those early hours literally reshape your neural pathways. Imagine for a moment individuals with identical talents, opportunities, and resources. The first awakens to the harsh sound of an alarm, immediately checks social media and email, rushes through breakfast if eating at all, and arrives at work already depleted. The second rises deliberately before necessity demands, spends time in reflection and planning, nourishes their body properly, and approaches their work with intention rather than obligation. After 1 month, their paths have begun to diverge. After 1 year, they are walking entirely different roads. After a decade, they inhabit different worlds altogether. This is not hyperbole, it is the compound effect of daily choices, magnified through the lens of those critical first 90 minutes. The morning hours are where potential energy converts to kinetic force. They represent the difference between potential and actualization, between what might be and what becomes reality. Consider the morning routine of Benjamin Franklin, who asked himself each day, "What good shall I do this day?" This question, posed in the quiet of dawn, set the direction for one of history's most productive and influential lives. Or examine the practice of Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, who used his mornings to prepare his mind for whatever challenges might arise. These were not accidental habits, but deliberate practices designed to harness the power of those first waking hours. You may argue that you are not a morning person, that your energy naturally peaks later in the day. But this misunderstands the purpose of the morning ritual. The objective is not to complete your most demanding work during this time, though many find their creative and intellectual powers heightened in these hours. Rather, the goal is to set the trajectory of your day before the world attempts to set it for you. It is to claim ownership of your attention and intention before they are claimed by others. The most important asset you possess is not your physical strength, your intelligence, or even your financial resources. It is your ability to direct your own focus. And this ability is never more powerful than in those first moments after waking. This is when you establish the mental environment in which all your subsequent thoughts and actions will occur. This is when you determine whether you will live deliberately or reactively. Consider this metaphor. Your mind is like a garden. Each morning provides fresh soil, most receptive to whatever seeds you plant. Plant thoughts of gratitude, purpose, and possibility, and these will grow throughout your day. Plant nothing deliberately, and the weeds of doubt, distraction, and discontent will naturally take root. The choice is yours, but it must be made consciously, particularly in those first 90 minutes. Imagine standing at the helm of a great ship as it leaves harbor each morning. The initial direction you set, even by a single degree, determines whether you arrive at your intended destination or find yourself miles off course by day's end. Your morning routine is that initial setting of the compass. It may seem insignificant in the moment. What difference does it make? Whether you spend 10 minutes in meditation or scrolling through your phone, but projected across the voyage of your life, these small decisions create radical divergence. The industrialist J.P. Morgan, who financed America's Industrial Revolution, was known for his rigorous morning routine of reading and contemplation. When asked about the secret to his success in making decisions that shaped nations, he pointed to his morning hours. "I can do a year's work in 9 months, but not in 12, he said, referring to the focused power that came from his morning discipline. What happens in those critical 90 minutes? First, your brain transitions from theta waves of sleep to the alpha waves of wakefulness. During this transition, your mind remains highly receptive to suggestion and programming. The thoughts you introduce during this period have unusual staying power throughout your day. Second, the decisions you make in these moments require willpower, and willpower, like a muscle, strengthens with use but depletes with time. By exercising this faculty early, you build greater reserves for later challenges. Third, you establish momentum, either positive or negative, that tends to perpetuate throughout your day. Consider the case of Howard Schultz, who built Starbucks into a global empire. Despite the demands of running a multinational corporation, Schultz rises at 4:30 a.m. every morning to maintain his ritual of connection with his wife, exercise, and strategic thinking before entering the office. He attributes much of his success to insights and clarity gained during these morning hours. Similar patterns emerge when studying figures like Tim Cook of Apple, Indra Nooyi of PepsiCo, and countless other leaders across industries. The common denominator is not the specific activities they choose, but their recognition of the morning's sacred power. Perhaps you're thinking, "This sounds appealing, but my life is already established. I have responsibilities, habits, and patterns that cannot be easily changed." This is precisely why the morning offers such transformative potential. While restructuring your entire life may seem overwhelming, reclaiming those first 90 minutes requires only a decision and some initial discipline. It is the smallest gateway through which the greatest changes can enter your life. The beauty of this truth is its democratic nature. Unlike advantages of birth, education, or circumstance, the morning belongs equally to every person. The billionaire receives the same 90 minutes as the struggling artist. The CEO has no more claim to this time than the entry-level employee. The only difference lies in how this gift is utilized. Imagine those who have risen from circumstances of incredible adversity, individuals like Oprah Winfrey, who grew up in poverty but used her mornings to prepare herself for opportunities others might miss, or consider Abraham Lincoln, who rose before dawn to read and write by candlelight, educating himself when formal schooling was beyond his reach. These individuals understood that while external circumstances might be beyond their control, those first moments of the day remain their sovereign territory. There exists a veil between sleeping and waking, a liminal space where the creative and analytical aspects of your mind can work in rare harmony. Artists, writers, and inventors have long recognized this state. Hypnagogia. Scientists call it when the constraints of conventional thinking loosen and new connections form. This state is most accessible during the transition from sleep to wakefulness. Yet another reason those first 90 minutes hold such potent creative power. Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps history's greatest polymath, kept a notebook by his bedside to capture insights that arrived during this transitional state. Einstein spoke of visualizing himself riding on a beam of light during similar moments, eventually leading to his theory of relativity. The solutions to your most pressing problems, the innovations your work requires, the creative breakthroughs you seek, these often lie waiting in this morning twilight, between conscious and subconscious thought. But accessing this power requires intention. It demands that you protect these sacred minutes from invasion by the trivial, the urgent but unimportant, the noise that masquerades as signal in our hyper-connected world. It means establishing boundaries that may initially feel uncomfortable, not checking your phone until after you've set your own agenda for the day, not allowing the opinions of social media to color your thinking before you've had a chance to form your own thoughts. Walt Disney, whose imagination created worlds that continue to inspire generations, was known for arriving at his studio before anyone else, walking the empty pathways of his creative kingdom, visualizing new possibilities before the demands of execution filled his day. This wasn't merely a quirk of personality, but a deliberate strategy to harness the clarity and creativity available in those morning hours. The philosopher William James wrote that the greatest revolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives. Nowhere is this power more accessible than in the morning hours, when your mind is most malleable, most receptive to the attitudes you choose to cultivate. Consider for a moment your current morning routine. Be honest in your assessment. Does it reflect a deliberate choice to direct your life's course, or is it the product of habit, convenience, and reaction? Do you begin your day by reinforcing your highest values and most important goals, or do you immediately subject yourself to the priorities and emergencies of others? The answers to these questions reveal much about the trajectory of your life. The good news is that transformation begins with a single morning. You need not wait for a new year, a new job, or a dramatic life change. Tomorrow's first 90 minutes are yours to reclaim. And while the specific content of your morning routine should be personalized to your goals and values, certain principles remain universal. First, begin with gratitude. Before your feet touch the floor, acknowledge something for which you're thankful. This simple practice reorients your brain from scarcity to abundance, from problem-seeking to opportunity recognition. Napoleon Hill emphasized gratitude not as a passive feeling, but as an active force that attracts further reasons to be grateful. Second, connect with your purpose. Remind yourself of your why, the deeper reason behind your daily efforts. Whether through meditation, prayer, journaling, or simply quiet contemplation, reestablish contact with your core values before the world attempts to impose its values upon you. Third, care for your physical temple. Movement, hydration, and nourishment are not merely health practices but cognitive enhancers. The body and mind are inseparable. The condition of one inevitably affects the other. Even 10 minutes of deliberate physical activity in the morning sends cascading signals of vitality through your entire system. Fourth, input determines output. Be intentional about what you allow into your mind during these precious minutes. The news, social media, and even conversations with certain individuals can hijack your mental and emotional state. Choose, instead, to feed your mind with material that elevates, inspires, and aligns with your aspiration. Fifth, plan with precision. As Peter Drucker observed, what gets measured gets managed. Take time to identify your most important objectives for the day, not a sprawling list of tasks, but the vital few that will move your life forward in meaningful ways. Then commit to tackling the most significant of these during your day's first energy peak. These principles, applied consistently in those first 90 minutes, create a foundation for achievement that transcends temporary motivation or fleeting inspiration. They establish a structure within which greatness becomes not just possible but probable. Consider the case of Mahatma Gandhi, who, despite leading a national revolution and negotiating with world powers, began each day before dawn with prayer and spinning thread activities that centered him in his values and connected him to the people he served. Or examine the practice of Marie Curie, who rose early to pursue her scientific work before her teaching and family responsibilities began. These individuals didn't find extra hours in their day. They made intentional use of the hours available to all. The difference between those who achieve greatness and those who merely dream of it often comes down to this. Great achievers protect their mornings with unwavering discipline. They recognize that while many things in life may be negotiable, this sacred time is not. They understand that to give away your morning is to give away your power. Perhaps you're wondering, what about rest? What about balance? Doesn't this emphasis on morning productivity contradict the need for adequate sleep? This represents a fundamental misunderstanding. The purpose of reclaiming your first 90 minutes is not to sacrifice rest, but to ensure that the time you spend awake is lived with intention rather than surrendered to inertia. In fact, those who master their mornings often find they require less recovery time because they operate from a place of purpose rather than reaction throughout their day. The quality of your sleep improves when you know that your waking hours are being used meaningfully. The ancient wisdom that the laborer's sleep is sweet contains a profound truth. Purposeful exertion creates the conditions for genuine rest. By bringing intention to your morning, you create the foundation for both greater productivity and more restorative relaxation. Consider to the role of preparation. The most effective morning routines actually begin the night before, by taking a few minutes before sleep to lay out your priorities for the coming day, to prepare your environment, and to set a clear intention for your waking moments. You remove friction from your morning transition. Masters of achievement reduce decision fatigue by eliminating unnecessary choices. During these critical first minutes, Steve Jobs famously wore the same style of clothing each day to conserve his decision-making energy for more important matters. While this specific practice may not appeal to you, the principle remains valid. Simplify your morning by preparing in advance, allowing your mental resources to focus on what truly matters rather than on trivialities. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "The future enters into us in order to transform itself in us, long before it happens." Your morning ritual is precisely this process of allowing your desired future to enter into you, to transform your thinking, and subsequently your actions, long before that future manifests externally. It is a daily practice of becoming the person capable of creating the outcomes you desire. Andrew Carnegie, who rose from poverty to become one of history's greatest philanthropists, attributed his success to the habit of giving strict attention to the one thing at hand. This capacity for focused attention, increasingly rare in our distracted age, is most accessible during your morning hours, before the competing demands of the day fragment your concentration. Yet implementing this wisdom requires overcoming inertia, both physical and mental, the comfort of your bed, the temptation of the snooze button, the allure of just a few more minutes of sleep. These are the guardians at the gateway to your potential. They test your commitment to your highest self. They ask, in effect, how badly do you want the life you claim to desire? Napoleon Hill observed that desire is the starting point of all achievement. The question becomes, is your desire for comfort in this moment stronger than your desire for growth, achievement, and purpose? Your answer, demonstrated through action rather than intention, shapes your destiny more powerfully than any external factor. This is not about implementing a specific morning routine copied from a successful individual, but about understanding the principle. Those first 90 minutes represent your greatest opportunity to direct your life's course rather than merely reacting to circumstances. The specific activities that fill this time should reflect your unique purposes, strengths, and aspiration. For some, these minutes might include creative work, writing, drawing, composing when the mind is fresh and conventional. Thinking hasn't yet established its boundaries. For others, it might involve strategic planning, identifying opportunities, and mapping approaches before the day's tactical demands consume attention. Still others might dedicate this time to physical training, building the stamina and vitality needed for sustained high performance. The content matters less than the intentionality. What unifies the morning practices of history's highest achievers is not what they did, but why they did it. To ensure that the day's first energy served their highest priorities rather than the world's endless demands, consider the metaphor of compound interest, which Einstein allegedly called the eighth wonder of the world. Just as small financial investments, consistently made and allowed to compound, eventually create enormous wealth, so to do small investments of focused morning time create extraordinary returns in achievement, clarity, and purpose when compounded over months and years. If you dedicated just 30 minutes each morning to deliberate growth in your field, reading, practicing, planning, you would accumulate 180.5 hours of focused development in a single year. This represents nearly 5 40-hour workweeks of additional mastery. Extend this practice over 5 years, and you've invested over 900 hours in your development, all without requiring major life restructuring, simply by reclaiming a small portion of your morning. This is the secret that explains why certain individuals seem to accomplish so much more than others despite having access to the same 24 hours. They understand the asymmetric value of morning time, that an hour before the workday begins is worth multiples of an hour during the workday, because it is free from interruption and aligned with your brain's natural peak of executive function. The entrepreneur Tim Ferriss, who has interviewed hundreds of world-class performers across disciplines, found a common theme. More than 80% of these exceptional individuals practice some form of morning ritual focused on gaining control of their internal state before confronting external demands. This is not coincidence, but causation. The morning ritual is not merely a habit of successful people, but one of the mechanisms that creates their success. Perhaps you're thinking, but I have young children, or my work schedule makes this impossible. These are understandable concerns, but they represent challenges to be solved rather than reasons to abandon the principle. Parents of young children might rise 30 minutes before their families, creating a small but significant window of personal direction. Those with demanding or unusual work hours can apply the principle not necessarily to the morning as defined by the clock, but to the first 90 minutes after waking, whenever that occurs. The essence of this wisdom lies not in rigid adherence to specific hours, but in recognizing the power of those first conscious moments and protecting them from invasion by the trivial, the urgent but unimportant, and the agendas of others. It lies in understanding that how you begin determines, to a remarkable degree, how you continue. Napoleon Hill wrote that whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. The morning hours represent your best opportunity to conceive and deeply believe in the possibility of your goals to impress them upon your subconscious mind, when it is most receptive, before the doubts and limitations imposed by conventional thinking have a chance to take hold. Many who recognize this truth attempt to implement it through willpower alone, only to abandon their morning discipline when motivation inevitably wanes. This approach misunderstands the nature of habit formation. Sustainable change requires systems, not just inspiration. It demands that you make your desired behavior the path of least resistance. Place your phone in another room before sleeping, requiring physical movement to check it upon waking. Prepare your morning reading, writing materials, or exercise equipment the night before, removing friction from your intended activities. Consider partnering with an accountability ally who shares your commitment to morning mastery. These environmental and social supports transform what begins as discipline into what eventually becomes natural rhythm. Winston Churchill, who guided Britain through its darkest hours, maintained a ritual of writing in the early hours before the demands of wartime leadership consumed his day. This wasn't merely productive, it was preservative, maintaining his clarity and perspective amid chaos. Your morning ritual serves a similar function in your life, creating a center of calm purpose that holds steady even as circumstances fluctuate. The industrialist Henry J. Kaiser, whose companies built the Hoover Dam and manufactured Liberty ships during World War II, was known for rising at 5 a.m. to review plans and correspondence before others began their workday. When asked how he managed such complex enterprises, he cited this practice: "Problems are only opportunities in work clothes," he said, "and tackling them early gives you the advantage." This perspective, seeing the first hours as opportunity rather than obligation, transforms how you experience waking. Rather than dragging yourself reluctantly from sleep into requirement, you rise with anticipation for this time that belongs solely to you and your highest aspiration. Consider to the role of consistency. The power of your morning ritual compounds not just through what you do but through the regularity with which you do it. Neuroscience confirms that consistent behaviors create stronger neural pathways, making repetition of those behaviors increasingly effortless over time. What begins as conscious discipline gradually becomes unconscious pattern. This explains why those who maintain their morning ritual even on weekends and holidays, adjusting the timing perhaps, but preserving the essential elements, find it increasingly sustainable. By contrast, those who abandon the practice on days without external demands often struggle to maintain it at all, constantly restarting rather than deepening their practice. The mathematician and philosopher Blaise Pascal observed that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. This insight illuminates another benefit of the morning ritual. It develops your capacity for presence and self-direction in a world engineered to fragment attention. By practicing focused intention during these first minutes, you strengthen your ability to maintain direction throughout your day. Consider the alternatives. Most people begin their days in one of two dysfunctional patterns, either rushing reactively through a chaotic process of preparation, immediately creating a stress response that colors their entire day, or hitting the snooze button repeatedly, training their minds to resist rather than embrace waking life. Both patterns establish neural and hormonal environments antithetical to achievement and fulfillment. By contrast, the deliberate morning ritual creates physiological conditions of calm alertness, what athletes call the zone and what psychologists term flow state, characterized by focused attention, elevated but controlled energy, and a sense of capability rather than overwhelm. The state, established in your first 90 minutes, creates a template that your brain naturally seeks to maintain. The composer Ludwig van Beethoven walked through the forests of Vienna at dawn, notating musical ideas that came to him in this receptive state. The author Ernest Hemingway wrote standing at his desk each morning as the sun rose, capturing his clearest thoughts before the day's distractions intervened. The civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. spent the early hours in prayer and preparation, finding strength for the tremendous challenges he would face. These diverse individuals shared a common recognition: the morning offers unique powers of clarity, creativity, and conviction. One of Napoleon Hill's most profound insights was that the starting point of all achievement is desire. But desire alone remains impotent without directed action, and directed action requires an environment conducive to focus. The morning ritual creates precisely this environment, a protected space where your deepest desires can connect with practical steps toward their realization. Before the world's competing priorities dilute your resolve, consider the metaphor of a rocket launch. The greatest energy expenditure occurs during those first minutes of liftoff, overcoming the powerful gravitational forces that keep the vessel earthbound. Similarly, your greatest willpower expenditure often occurs in those first moments of your day, overcoming the inertia of comfort and habit to establish a trajectory toward your goals. Once momentum is established, maintaining your course requires far less energy than that initial launch. This explains why many who struggle with consistency in their aspiration trace the problem, not to a lack of desire or even a lack of knowledge, but to the critical failure of their morning launch sequence. They attempt to reach orbit without generating sufficient escape velocity in those crucial first minutes, then wonder why they remain trapped in patterns of mediocrity. The philosopher William James wrote that the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Your morning ritual is the daily practice of this choosing, selecting, with deliberate intention, the thoughts that will shape your perception, decisions, and actions throughout your day. In practical terms, this might mean beginning with an affirmation that reinforces your core identity and purpose. Napoleon Hill recommended stating your chief aim aloud, with conviction, upon waking. Modern psychology confirms the power of this practice through research on self-signaling, the phenomenon by which our actions shape our beliefs about ourselves, as much as our beliefs shape our actions. When you declare your intention and identity in those first conscious moments, whether through spoken words, written reflection, or meditative visualization, you activate what psychologists call unclothed cognition, the tendency to embody the qualities you associate with your self-conception. You literally become more capable of acting in alignment with your highest aspiration. By first affirming that this alignment is core to your identity, the entrepreneur Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx and self-made billionaire, begins each morning by identifying something to be grateful for and setting her intention for the day. During her drive to work, she credits this practice with maintaining her resilience through years of rejection and setbacks before her eventual breakthrough. How you start your day is how you're going to live your day, she explains, and how you live your day is the way you live your life. This principle extends beyond individual achievement to leadership. Those who direct organizations, movements, or families find that their morning discipline affects not just their own productivity, but the culture they create. When you begin your day centered in purpose rather than reaction, you bring a qualitatively different presence to your interactions with others. You listen more attentively, respond more thoughtfully, and make decisions aligned with long-term values rather than short-term pressures. The business leader Stephen R. Covey described this as the difference between leadership and management, the ability to determine whether you're putting your ladder against the right wall before you begin climbing. The morning ritual provides this essential perspective, allowing you to evaluate your direction before the day's momentum makes course correction exponentially more difficult. Consider the metaphor of a ship's captain. Each morning brings a new opportunity to check your coordinates, confirm your destination, and make necessary adjustments to your course before the day's journey continues. Without this regular recalibration, even small navigational errors compound over time, potentially leading miles away from your intended harbor. Your morning ritual is this daily confirmation of coordinates and course. The statesman Benjamin Disraeli observed that the secret of success is constancy of purpose. Your morning ritual embodies this constancy, reconnecting you with your deepest purposes before the world's constant demands create the illusion that the urgent supersedes the important. It allows you to begin each day from first principles rather than inherited momentum. This is not merely philosophy but practical psychology. Research in the field of willpower depletion shows that self-control diminishes with use throughout the day. The decisions that align with your long-term goals become increasingly difficult to make as hours pass. By establishing your most important priorities and taking initial action toward them in your first 90 minutes, you leverage your peak willpower reserves for your highest purposes. Napoleon Hill emphasized that effort only fully releases its reward after a person refuses to quit. The morning ritual embodies this persistence, this daily recommitment to your path regardless of yesterday's successes or failures. It represents the understanding that achievement is not a single heroic effort, but the accumulated result of thousands of small, consistent actions aligned with a clear purpose. Tennis champion Serena Williams, winner of 23 Grand Slam singles titles, begins each day with visualization of successful performance followed by physical training, a routine she has maintained through decades of competition. When asked about the secret to her longevity at the highest levels of her sport, she points to this consistency. It's not the days when I feel like training that make the difference. It's the mornings when I don't feel like it but do it anyway. This insight reveals another dimension of the morning's power. It develops the capacity to act independent of emotional state, perhaps the single most important skill for long-term achievement in any field. By honoring your commitments to yourself first thing each day, particularly when you don't feel motivated, you build what the ancient Greeks called arete, excellence of character expressed through habitual action. The psychologist Angela Duckworth, known for her research on grit, defines this quality as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Her studies reveal that this characteristic more than talent, intelligence, or opportunity predicts exceptional achievement. The morning ritual builds grit through daily practice, strengthening your capacity to maintain direction despite fluctuating circumstances and emotions. Consider the case of J.K. Rowling, who wrote the early Harry Potter novels in morning sessions at cafes. Before her teaching responsibilities began, often while caring for her infant daughter, she had neither abundant time nor optimal conditions. Yet she protected those morning minutes with fierce discipline. It's our choices that show what we truly are. She wrote through her character Dumbledore, a principle she embodied through her morning commitment to writing despite circumstances that might have justified delay. This pattern repeats across domains. Individuals who achieve remarkable results, not because conditions perfectly supported their efforts, but because they created protected space for their priorities regardless of conditions. The morning ritual institutionalizes this protection, establishing boundaries around your most important work before the day's demands can erode them. Napoleon Hill wrote that imagination is the workshop wherein are fashioned all plans created by man. The morning hours, when your mind transitions from the imaginative state of dreams to the practical state of wakefulness, offers unique access to this workshop. By entering this space with intention rather than immediate turning to external stimuli, you maintain this connection to your creative capacities. Thomas Edison, holder of over 1,000 patents, kept a cot in his laboratory specifically for short periods of rest followed by work during the hypnagogic state, the transition between sleep and wakefulness. He recognized that this liminal condition offered access to insights unavailable to the fully rational, waking mind. Your morning ritual creates a daily opportunity to access this same creative borderland. The anthropologist Angeles Arian studied indigenous wisdom traditions across cultures and found a common thread: the recognition of dawn as a spiritually significant transition requiring mindful observation. From Native American sunrise ceremonies to Buddhist morning meditations to Islamic Fajr prayer, diverse traditions acknowledge the power of these first conscious moments to set the tone for harmonious living. This cross-cultural recognition suggests something deeper than arbitrary custom. It indicates an intuitive human understanding of the morning's psychological and spiritual significance. These traditions recognize that how we negotiate the boundary between unconsciousness and consciousness profoundly affects our subsequent experience of reality. The difference between extraordinary achievement and ordinary results often comes down not to capacity, but to consistency, the ability to maintain direction and effort over time, despite changing circumstances. Your morning ritual anchors this consistency, providing a daily return to your fundamental priorities regardless of the previous day's successes or setbacks. Consider the case of Maya Angelou, who rented a hotel room where she worked from 6:30 a.m. until early afternoon each day while writing her acclaimed books. "I keep a hotel room in every town I write in," she explained. "I go into the room at around 6:30 a.m. I have in the room a Bible, a dictionary, Roget's Thesaurus. In the same drawer, I have some Egyptian bronze trinkets, a yellow notepad, some blue cards, and some ballpoint pens. I try to get there around 6:30 a.m. I work until 12:30 p.m. or 1:30 p.m. Usually I go over what I've written that day at about 4:30 p.m. This structured approach beginning at the same time, in the same environment, with the same tools created the conditions for sustained creative output over decades, resulting in some of the most powerful literary works of the 20th century. The specifics of her ritual mattered less than the consistency with which she practiced it, creating a container for her creative work that transcended momentary motivation. Similarly, the investor Warren Buffett, whose financial acumen has created billions in wealth, begins each day with extensive reading of annual reports and financial journals. "I just sit in my office and read all day," he explains of his typical schedule. This is not a luxury afforded by success, but one of the disciplines that created that success, a practice maintained consistently through decades of changing market conditions. The pattern becomes clear. Exceptional achievers in diverse fields share this common characteristic: they establish protected time, typically in the morning, devoted to their highest priorities, and they maintain this practice with remarkable consistency. This is not coincidence, but causation. Their achievement does not enable their ritual. Their ritual enables their achievement. You might ask, if this morning ritual is so powerful, why don't more people practice it? The answer lies in the gap between knowledge and application. Many know intellectually that how they begin their day matters, Yet they fail to implement this knowledge consistently because they attempt to rely on motivation rather than systems. Motivation fluctuates, systems endure. By designing your environment to support your morning ritual, preparing your space the night before, removing digital distractions, perhaps even finding an accountability partner with whom you check in, each morning you create conditions that make your desired behavior more likely. Regardless of momentary feelings, Napoleon Hill emphasized that self-discipline begins with the mastery of your thoughts. If you don't control what you think, you can't control what you do. Control what you do. The morning ritual provides the optimal conditions for this foundational mastery, allowing you to select your mental focus before the world's agenda invades your attention. Consider how different your experience would be if, instead of immediately checking messages and news upon waking, essentially inviting the world's priorities into your mind. Before establishing your own, you first centered yourself in gratitude, reviewed your purpose, and identified your most important objectives for the day. The same external circumstances would remain, but your relationship to them would fundamentally change. This shift represents what psychologists call internal locus of control, the belief that you determine your own outcomes rather than being at the mercy of external forces. Research consistently shows that individuals with strong internal locus of control demonstrate greater achievement, satisfaction, and resilience than those who perceive themselves as primarily responding to outside circumstances. The morning ritual develops and reinforces this internal locus. By emphasizing your agency in determining how you begin each day, it establishes a daily practice of choosing rather than reacting, of directing rather than being directed. Over time, this practice generalizes to other aspects of your life, strengthening your overall sense of authorship in your own story. As Napoleon Hill wrote, "You have absolute control over but one thing, and that is your thoughts." The morning ritual is the practical application of this principle, a daily reclaiming of your mental territory before it can be colonized by external influences. It is a declaration, renewed each day, that you will determine the direction of your attention rather than surrendering it to whatever happens to be most demanding or stimulating. The entrepreneur and author Tim Ferriss, who has interviewed hundreds of world-class performers across fields, found that more than 80% maintain some form of morning meditation or mindfulness practice. This is not spiritual luxury, but practical psychology. By training their attention through deliberate practice, these individuals develop greater capacity to direct their focus throughout their day. The musician and producer Quincy Jones, whose work has earned him 28 Grammy Awards, begins each day with meditation followed by technical practice on the piano. At over 90 years of age and still professionally active, he attributes his creative longevity to this consistent ritual of morning renewal. The poet William Blake wrote that the true method of knowledge is experiment. Your morning ritual represents a daily experiment in directing your own consciousness, testing and refining approaches that strengthen your connection to purpose, clarity, and intentional action. Through consistent practice, you discover not just what works for others, but what works specifically for you. This personalization is essential. While the principle of protecting your first 90 minutes remains universal, the specific content of this time should align with your unique strengths, challenges, and aspiration. For some, physical movement creates the optimal mental state for subsequent focused work. For others, writing or strategic planning capitalizes best on morning clarity. The key is not the specific activity, but the intentionality with which you approach this sacred time. Napoleon Hill emphasized throughout his work that success principles must be personalized to be effective. Knowledge is only potential power, he wrote. It becomes power only when, and if, it is organized into definite plans of action. Your morning ritual transforms general wisdom into specific application, taking timeless principles and expressing them through practices aligned with your individual path. This brings us to the ultimate purpose of reclaiming your first 90 minutes, not productivity for its own sake, but alignment between how you spend your life's energy and what you truly value. The morning ritual serves as a daily recommitment to this alignment, a practice of ensuring that your actions reflect your deepest intentions, rather than merely responding to external demands. Consider the case of Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, who rose early each morning to write even during his imprisonment in concentration camps. This wasn't merely productive, it was preservative, maintaining his sense of purpose and meaning amid unimaginable suffering. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, he later wrote. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Your morning ritual creates and expands this space between stimulus and response. It strengthens your capacity to choose rather than merely react, to direct your attention intentionally, rather than surrendering it to whatever happens to be most demanding or stimulating. It establishes a daily practice of freedom, the freedom to determine your focus, before the world attempts to determine it for you. The physician and pioneer Jonas Salk, who developed the first successful polio vaccine, was known for his early morning walks on the beach near his California home. These were not merely recreational breaks, but essential components of his creative process. The answer to this question came to me suddenly one night. He said of a breakthrough in his research, I woke up and wrote it down, but the answer had been prepared by my unconscious mind after a gestation period of several months. His morning ritual created the conditions for such insights to emerge and be captured. This pattern of morning revelation appears consistently across disciplines, from scientists like Salk to artists like Picasso, who painted at dawn, to business innovators like Steve Jobs, who asked himself each morning, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? These diverse achievers recognize that the boundary between sleep and wakefulness offers unique access to insights unavailable during normal conscious processing. By establishing your morning ritual, you create conditions for similar breakthroughs in your own work and life. You open a channel between your conscious intentions and your subconscious resources, a collaboration essential for achievement beyond ordinary limits. Napoleon Hill described the subconscious mind as the connecting link between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence. Your morning ritual strengthens this connection, creating regular access to wisdom and creativity beyond your analytical thinking. It establishes a daily practice of integration between your rational objectives and your intuitive knowing. This integration explains why many who implement a consistent morning ritual report not just greater productivity, but enhanced well-being, a sense of wholeness and purpose that transcends specific accomplishments. They experience what psychologists call eudaimonic happiness, the fulfillment that comes not from fleeting pleasure, but from living in alignment with your deepest values and purposes. As you contemplate implementing or refining your own morning ritual, remember that the goal is not perfection but progress. You need not transform your schedule overnight. Begin with small, sustainable changes, perhaps waking just 15 minutes earlier than usual and dedicating this time to reflection before engaging with digital devices. As this practice becomes comfortable, gradually expand the boundary until you've reclaimed your full 90 minutes. The essence of this practice lies not in rigid adherence to specific times or activities, but in the principle of claiming ownership of your attention before surrendering it to external demands. It lies in recognizing the asymmetric value of those first conscious moments and protecting them accordingly. The philosopher Aristotle wrote that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. Your morning ritual embodies this wisdom, creating a daily practice of excellence that gradually reshapes not just what you do, but who you become. It establishes a foundation of intentionality upon which all your subsequent activities rest. In a world increasingly engineered to fragment attention and commodify consciousness, this practice becomes not merely advantageous but essential. It represents a daily reclaiming of your sovereignty over your own mind, a declaration, renewed each morning, that you will determine the direction of your life rather than being carried along by circumstance, convention, or the agendas of others. As Napoleon Hill wrote, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Your morning ritual creates the optimal conditions for both conception and belief, for envisioning possibilities beyond conventional limits, and for establishing the deep conviction that you can bring these possibilities into reality. The difference between those who achieve extraordinary results and those who merely dream of such achievement often comes down to this daily practice of intentional beginning. It represents the understanding that destiny is determined not by grand, occasional decisions, but by small, consistent choices, particularly those made in the precious territory of your first 90 minutes. Tomorrow morning, as consciousness returns and you stand at the threshold between sleep and wakefulness, remember this truth: how you cross that threshold significantly determines the day that follows. Choose to cross it with intention rather than inertia, with clarity rather than confusion, with purpose rather than passivity. In that choice made again and again, morning after morning, lies the difference between a life of reaction and a life of creation, between merely existing and truly living, between accepting limitations and achieving greatness. In those first 90 minutes, you hold the power to set in motion forces that will shape not just your day but your destiny. The future belongs to those who prepare for it today, and that preparation begins in the sacred space of your morning ritual, the daily practice of determining your direction before the world attempts to determine it for you. This is not mere productivity, but profound empowerment, the reclaiming of your rightful authority over your own life's course. As the dawn breaks tomorrow, remember, your destiny awaits your direction. Those first 90 minutes contain within them the seeds of everything you will become. Plant them with intention, nurture them with consistency, and watch as your highest aspiration gradually transform from possibility into reality. One morning, one choice, one intentional beginning at a time. Your greatness is not determined by grand, occasional moments, but by small, consistent choices, particularly those made when no one is watching, when the only accountability is to yourself and your dreams. In the privacy of those first morning minutes lies the public reality of the life you will create. Choose wisely, choose intentionally, and choose again tomorrow. For in that choosing lies the difference between the life you have and the life you desire, between existing in the shadow of your potential and standing fully in the light of your greatness. The morning awaits. Your destiny awaits. Rise to meet it with purpose,